Good afternoon, everyone. We're very pleased that you could be with us today to learn more about this unique funding opportunity of the research and extension experiences for undergraduates. So we'll go ahead and get started. Please remember that this webinar is being recorded, and we ask you to be sure that your microphone is muted until we get to the question and answer session at the end. If you need technical support from Zoom, please see the phone number on your screen, which you can call and request option number 2. Also, throughout the presentation, you can type your questions in the chat box, and we'll try to get to them as we can. And please do notice that the slides and the recording from this conference will be posted to the Technical Assistance webinar page. So you will be able to access this later on to go over any pertinent information. We also want to present to you this non-discrimination statement, here at the beginning, as the USDA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. And if the need arises to file any kind of complaint, there are telephone numbers as well as web addresses that you can access, and addresses to write to as well. And we can maybe put a couple of those things into the chat box in case anybody needs access to that. Well, great. Thank you again for being here, everyone. And we'll get started with some brief introductions for our REEU program team. My name is Michelle Shelsky-Santos, and I am the National Program Leader for this program and another program focusing on undergraduate education in the Division of Community and Education, which is part of our Institute of Youth, Family, and Community. I've been with NIFA for about 2 years now and come from academia, where I was a professor in biochemistry and nutrition for 25 years. And now I would like to ask Donovan to present himself.
Thank you, Michelle. My name is Donovan McLaurin, and I am the program specialist for the REEU program. And I work alongside Michelle supporting this program along with others that support food and agriculture science at the undergraduate level through externships as REEU, stipends, fellowships, and scholarships. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Donovan. We want to give you a brief overview of the topics that will be covered today. We're going to give an overview of NIFA and how the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative, or AFRI, fits in, and the education and workforce development within several AFRI programs. And then we will focus specifically on the research and extension experiences for undergraduates, or REEU program, for which we will be discussing this entire request for applications and their details. And then we will touch on the proposal evaluation process and provide a few additional resources and information that could be to your benefit. So we'll begin with overviews of NIFA and AFRI. The National Institute of Food and Agriculture, or NIFA, is the extramural science funding agency within the Research, Education, and Economics mission area of the United States Department of Agriculture. NIFA invests in and supports a variety of initiatives to ensure the long-term viability of agriculture and the ability to meet challenges of the future. NIFA provides funding and strategic leadership for programs to ensure that groundbreaking discoveries in ag-related sciences and technologies reach the people who can put them into practice. So we take this research and knowledge and bring it down to the consumers and the farmers, and really hope to communicate all these best practices. NIFA covers a variety of topics, as you can see on this slide. I always love to point out the fact that education here in the center, focusing on a variety of institutions, those that serve minorities, as well as focal points of teaching and learning and workforce development for the future agriculture workforce. We can touch on basically all of these topics that are here, from advanced technologies, animals and plants, to business and economy, natural resources, global engagement, food and nutrition security, food sciences, to environment, natural resources, farming and ranching. So all of these topics can be researched or taught through these programs, and also provide that community outreach or extension to get the information to the communities. Now we'll touch on an overview of the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative, or AFRI. As you can see here on the left, AFRI programs are aligned with the 6 Farm Bill priorities, and our current Farm Bill is still the 2018 Farm Bill, but we're hoping that a new one will be released sometime soon. These 6 Farm Bill priorities are agriculture economics and rural communities, agriculture systems and technology, animal health and production and animal products, bioenergy, natural resources and environment, food safety, nutrition and health, and plant health and production and plant products. So these 6 Farm Bill priorities are addressed through 3 different RFAs, or requests for applications. The first on the list is foundational and applied science, followed by sustainable agricultural systems. And the RFA that we're going to focus on today is education and workforce development, which currently has 5 programs in the fiscal year 2024 document: professional development for agricultural literacy, agricultural workforce training at community colleges, food and agricultural non-formal education. Our program highlighted in blue the research and extension experiences for undergraduates, and it also follows through with predoctoral and postdoctoral fellowship opportunities. So this RFA covers these 5 different programs, and so we will look at this document as well as some documents that support these 5 programs outside the RFA as well. So honing in here on our agriculture AFRI education and workforce development program is really focused on developing the next generation of research, education, and extension professionals for food and agricultural sciences. So really looking to equip students with skills, attitudes, knowledge necessary to be successful in the future workforce. Now we'll focus on our program, the Research and Extension Experiences for Undergraduates, or REEU program. And this program area priority promotes research and extension learning experiences for undergraduate students so that when they graduate, they can enter the workforce in food and agricultural sciences with exceptional skills and be successful. This initiative also allows colleges and universities to provide opportunities for these undergraduate students, including those from underrepresented and economically disadvantaged groups, minority serving institutions, community colleges, and universities. And an interesting point of this program is that at least 50% of the undergraduate fellows must come from outside the host institution. And so it allows the host institution to be able to offer smaller institutions where these opportunities don't normally exist, so that their students can also participate in these learning experiences. I also wanted to make note that up in this upper right corner, we will have this green box that gives you a reference page, either in the RFA, request for applications, or in the additional information document that we will provide the link to later on. So you can go back at page 22 of the RFA and find these purposes and priorities. We are also interested in projects that provide innovative experiences in agricultural technologies, including data science, artificial intelligence, robotics and automation, and gene editing. And NIFA also is supporting Nutrition Security Initiative, which has come down from the White House, defined as having consistent access, availability, and affordability of foods and beverages that promote well-being and prevent, and if needed, treat diseases, particularly among our nation's most socially disadvantaged. Excuse me there. And to provide you some examples of possible experiential learning projects, and again, they could be others as well, but they may include apprenticeships, internships, or similar participatory learning experiences, practica in agricultural laboratories, on farms, or cooperative extension programs, externships in the private or public sector, or study abroad programs, for example, focused on global food security issues to develop global competency skills. We have several different project and grant types that are listed in this RFA, and project types may be individual research, education, or extension, or they may be integrating two or more of the above. So research education, research extension, or all three, for example. And then the grant types are standard grants or strengthening standard under this acronym of FASE, Food and Agricultural Science Enhancement Strengthening Awards. And these grants are focused in on those institutions that have not been as successful in obtaining federal funds in prior years and may need a little more assistance. So we are happy to offer these different awards. You may be wondering, how do you qualify for a strengthening grant? Well, here you will see on the right side a flow chart that you can follow for strengthening grant eligibility. And the link to this is provided on the bottom left. On the top, if your institution grants a degree or is a state agricultural experiment station, then yes, you can continue. And if your organization is an EPSCoR state, and EPSCoR stands for Established Program to Stimulate Competitive Research, and there is a new list each year. And if you are on that list, if your state is on that list, then your institution would be eligible. If you're not on that institution, you can continue. And if you're in a minority serving institution that is not on the most successful list with grant funding, then you can also continue. You would be eligible. And if you're a small or mid-sized institution, when your total enrollment is less than 17.5 thousand students, and once again, not among the most successful, then you would be eligible for these strengthening funds. So the strengthening funds are given below the normal cutoff line, where the funding is provided, and we save a certain percentage, at least 15% of the total funds to the side, to be able to give these strengthening grant awards. In terms of eligibility, it is linked to the project type. So on this slide, and as indicated on page 33 of the RFA, these are for what we call those single function projects. So it would be just one of the three: research only, education only, or extension outreach only. And those that are eligible to apply for these project types are state agricultural experiment stations, colleges and universities, including junior colleges offering associate degrees or higher, university research foundations, other research institutions and organizations, federal agencies, national laboratories, private organizations or corporations, individuals who are U.S. citizens, nationals, or permanent residents, and any group of the above mentioned. For integrated projects, eligible applicants include colleges and universities that provide a bachelor's degree or higher degree, 1994 land-grant institutions, and Hispanic serving agricultural colleges and universities. And there is a link to those, a list of these universities that can be followed. So on this project type, the integrated projects, which combine research and extension, or research and education, extension education, or all three, you can see that the eligibility is a bit more limited and requires at least the bachelor's degree at an educational institution. There are a few award specifics that we wanted to mention as well. On the left, some limitations that your institution can submit any number of applications, but there is a limit on the number of awards made to one institution. So there is a maximum of 2 REU projects that may be awarded per lead or host institution. So if, for example, an institution submits 5 applications and they are all found to have merit by the review panel, only 2 of those, the top 2, could receive funding. Another limitation is the indirect cost rate. For NIFA REEU projects, they are not to exceed 30% of the total federal funds awarded. And please work with your external funds department there that can help you with all the math to not include participant support equipment in your calculation of indirect costs. Another important aspect to remember when applying for this program, on your right, that tuition for course credit or tuition remission activities and promotional items are not allowable costs in this program. We didn't put food on here, but usually food is not included. However, I wanted to mention to you that if we're conducting a day training or weekly training and the time limits of your training merit giving lunch to be able to have continuity of your activities, then you can justify that in your budget narrative. Okay, but it must be connected to project objectives. Okay, it couldn't be like a fun activity that's considered entertainment. That would not be allowed. Okay. Great. So I hope that you have a good foundation with that so far. And now I would like to turn it over to Donovan to talk more about application details and documents.
Thank you so very much, Michelle. So getting into these application details here, the deadline is 5:00 p.m. Eastern Time, August 15th, 2024, and the application should be submitted through grants.gov. There's a reference to the RFA page 36 for some more details. The program code is A7401. This is really important to ensure that your application is routed to the appropriate program within the AFRI, EWD, various areas. As Michelle mentioned, this RFA is an umbrella of various priority areas. So the program code that you want to select here is A7401. The funding ranges from $600,000 to $750,000, depending on the duration of your project. So those at 48 months, 600,000, those at 60 months, 750,000. And just to reiterate, there's no limit on the number of applications that your institution can submit. However, we are limited in awarding up to 2 awards per institution. And if you look in the chat and also here, the RFA is available at the link below. All right, next slide, please. Now, with the AFRI EWD RFA, there's also an AFRI RFA resources and guidance document that provides some additional information. You'll see this document referenced in that core RFA. Here with the AFRI EWD RFA, you'll find some additional information related to the AFRI review criteria, some additional information related to grant types and project types, as well as some information related to the eligibility for phase strengthening award. All right, and let's talk about some of these newer additions to the RFA. The first is the data management plan. And this is required of all applications, even if you feel that your projects will not produce any data. The data management plan should include the expected data type, its format, how it will be stored and preserved, how it will be shared, data protection and public access, along with the roles and responsibilities of personnel that will maintain the data. We ask that you also include publications in the National Agricultural Library Pub Ag, which is a relatively new system that we have. And through this data that's generated through NIFA funded projects appear in Ag Data Commons. And we ask that you update that data management plan in annual progress reports and the final report. There is also a link below to view NIFA funded research projects in the chat, and I'll provide that link in the chat in a moment. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry, Donovan, I think you got muted there momentarily on this.
Oh, thank you so very much. Yes. In addition to the data management plan, one of the newer additions is also the mentoring plan, which has always been a part of our EEU, but it's much more described here. We allow both the data management plan and the mentoring plan as separate attachments outside of the project narrative. In that mentoring plan, you must describe the training or credentials of individuals who will serve as mentors, the mentoring activities that the project participants will be engaged in, and also processes to ensure reasonable accommodations for program participants with disabilities or challenges with accessing program activities. And you can find more information in RFA pages 12 and 13. Next slide, please. So we've talked about some of those newer components, and I'd like to talk about other key application components. Still refer back to that RFA for a more exhaustive list of what should be there. So the project summary and abstract, there is a suggested format. So please look at the RFA and follow the links to some of the NIFA templates. There's the project narrative, and we'll talk about its page limits momentarily. You should have a bibliography and references cited. A logic model is required for those integrated projects. We talked about single function versus integrated projects. However, this logic model is encouraged even for those single function research only, extension only, or education only projects. There should be a budget as well as a budget narrative. And here we have other documents that reference to the RFA. So please go there and look to just see if there's anything else that could be or should be included. So as it relates to the project narrative, there is a 10-page limit. The font should be 12 point. It should be single spaced, and there should be 1-inch margins, and this includes all figures and tables. This is strictly enforced to ensure that we have an equitable review. The project narrative should include an overview, the approach. It should describe the research, extension, and education environment, and it should also describe project evaluation and reporting. For those that are submitting a resubmission, that resubmission should begin with a 1-page response to the previous review. And this 1-page response does not count against the 10-page project narrative limit. Again, to ensure that we have an equitable review process, that 10-page limit is strictly enforced. Applications that exceed the page limit will be returned without review. Next slide, please. All right, so moving into some of these other attachments. So there is a table for expected outputs, and there's a link for a suggested format there. And that's provided in that AFRI EWD RFA additional information. Also, we should include the key personnel roles. And here we have a note here is that any co-PD should qualify or be willing and able to assume the roles of the project director. Otherwise, we kindly ask that you name that person as a co-investigator, mentor, collaborator, whatever is appropriate there, but reserve co-PD for those that would have the qualifications and will be willing to assume the role of the PD. A management plan is required for those integrated projects, and we encourage it, however, for those other single function projects. There's a 3-page limit here. When it comes to your letters of support, collaboration, and mentoring, there's no page limit. Also, you may include minority serving institution documentation. This may be needed if applying for a phase strengthening standard grant. And here is a link to the Food and Agricultural Education Information System that we call FACE. And this is a database to pull some statistics related to food and ag and other natural resources disciplines um, to get some of those statistics that may support that you're a minority serving institution. Next slide, please. As mentioned before, applications are submitted through grants.gov, and NIFA only accepts electronic submissions of applications. There's a link for the NIFA grants application guide. One thing I'd like to note here is that application documents must be in portable document format or PDF to be accepted by NIFA. This includes your narrative, your budget justifications, perhaps your budget itself. It's normally in an Excel file that you would need to then convert to a PDF. So remember, all documents that's you are including in your grant application should be a PDF. Although grants.gov may allow you to upload those forms, NIFA does not. Our programs don't really agree with non-PDF documents. So again, want to really encourage you to ensure that all of your documents are PDF. And I would be a bit hesitant to use those third-party PDF builders. Those often cause some challenges. All right, and we're moving on to the proposal evaluation process. So there's reference to the evaluation process in the RFA on page 40, and there's a link at the bottom for greater detail, but I'd like to highlight some of these kind of 4 critical steps, or 4 critical components rather. Proposals are assigned for review to at least 3 reviewers with expertise in the proposed topic. Those reviewers produce an individual review of each proposal, evaluating the strengths and the weaknesses. Those written reviews are then used to begin panel discussions with other reviewers serving on the peer review panel. And it is through these panel discussions that peer review panelists come to consensus on the final rating and ranking of those proposals. So I've alluded to reviews, and so the question is, how will I be reviewed? The evaluation criteria for this program can be found in the additional resources, an AFRI request for applications resources link that we have here. And you can find on page 41 the specific evaluation criteria for the REEU program. So here's the general evaluation criteria. We'll look at the scientific and pedagogical merit of the application. Then our reviewers will assess the qualifications of the project personnel, the adequacy of the facilities, and the project management. We'll also review the project relevance, and we'll evaluate any center of excellence status where pertinent. And here's a general timeline of competitive programs, and I want to just note that this can be really nuanced as we're in different parts of the fiscal year, especially as we're awaiting for direction for budgets. Uh, but on average, it takes a competitive program about 4 to 6 months from the proposal due date to an award being made to an institution. In the first 1 to 2 months, the RFA, the request for application, is released.
proposals are written and planned, and they're submitted to program. 2 to 3 months following this, the proposals undergo the scientific peer review process, and proposal funding notifications are sent to applicants. Following that, it takes about 1 to 2 months for those awards to be finalized with our awards management division. And this is the division of NIFA that um, would officially convey that an award has been made. And as I open, I mentioned that this is a really nuanced process, and we will do our best to keep you updated as much as possible with the information that we have. And if you're in that process or you have been in that process in the past, we thank you for your continued patience. Next slide. And here we have some additional information. And I'm going to put this link in the chat now. If you're curious about the type of projects that have been funded successfully by the REEU program, you can use our NRP, our Research, Education, and Economics Information System to find those funded awards. There's a link that provides a search, and you can then make your query and include the program code in the link in the chat, and as well as the link that you'll receive when you get these slides. It will have this direct link. In the bottom right there, we have our funding success rate. In our most recent cycle, there's about nearly a 38% funding success rate. Last year, we were at 48.8%, and previous years about 31%, the year prior about 39%. And we're averaging at about a 39.4% success rate with the REEU program. Next slide, please. Also, here are some links to upcoming events. So the NIFA events calendar is a great resource for monitoring deadlines, meetings, and webinars. We also have a separate calendar that details the request for applications, those anticipated publication dates, to keep you apprised of what's in the works and when you might see an RFA that is published for public viewing. Next slide. And NIFA is really listening to stakeholder feedback, and we are all about enhancing our technical assistance and outreach. Here are 2 links. We have recordings of past events and information about future events available on NIFA's new webpage. So this is a grant training and technical assistance website. Also, we are seeking technical assistance topics to discuss at a future date. So there's a second link for that. So grants applicant and awardee technical assistance sessions. And these are about an hour and a half, and they provide stakeholders opportunities to ask questions of their own and obtain information that's needed to access NIFA programs. And here is a number of resources. So a link to all the funding opportunities across the agency. Next is a link to the competitive grants flowcharts, the NIFA grant resources, the NIFA policy guide. There's a resource for indirect cost. And we've mentioned this one earlier, but there's a NIFA application guide, NIFA applications via grants.gov. We have some instructions there. And lastly, information on awarded grants. So across various programs you can find those using this portal enterprise search link at the very bottom. And I will turn it back over to Michelle. And I see that we do have questions in the Q&A box. And I'll work with Michelle to facilitate those. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Donovan, for giving us those details on the application process and all the important components of the application, as well as all that great additional information. Thank you so much. So from my sharing the screen, I'll rely on Donovan to dictate the questions because I can't see the chat box right now.
Yes, absolutely. I do see a question. It's it's related to project types and grant types. So the question is, are we to choose from, are we to choose a category from each, or do we choose a grant type and then a project type? I think this may be related to our single function um, versus integrated projects, and maybe a little bit of maybe some clarity regarding our standard versus standard phase grant types. That's what I think I'm gleaning from this question.
Yes, I do believe that within that grants package, you do select one of each. So most of the grants will be standard unless your institution qualifies for that strengthening grant according to that flow chart criteria. So please do take a look at all of those criteria. Check to see if your state is on the list of EPSCoR states for fiscal year 2024, as it does change from year to year. And then we do ask you as well to choose a category, whether you have an integrated project combining research and education or research extension or any one of those combinations, or if your project is focused on one area only. I hope that helps. There are a couple of nuances. For example, I'm just thinking about some things from the RFA. So if you have just a couple of students working on a research project, that doesn't mean that it's education necessarily. It can still be just a research project. Okay. And if there is it's like that's the main example I'm thinking of now. Donovan, do you remember any other examples regarding those project types?
No, that's the only thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
And but I would just kind of plug that, if you're trying to um, if you're thinking, oh, am I phase eligible or not, that's something that we're able to also consider on our side, even
Yes.
after you've submitted that application. However, if you have questions between now and then, and if you're curious if you would be eligible, that's something that we would be able to help guide you through using that flow chart.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for that. Just in case you perhaps missed an opportunity to apply for a strengthening grant, we always do check those categories, and in the past have been able to identify one or two institutions that actually qualified for that kind of funding, even though they had not requested it in the beginning. So we do check that and we verify. We've also had the opposite happen, an institution that forgot to check to see if they were on the EPSCoR list, and the former fiscal year they were on the list, but the year they submitted the application, they were not on the list. So that changed their application status as well. We do some thorough screening, so we do, help with that. And as Donovan mentioned, if you're not sure, please do reach out to us with your questions.
And let me see, I'm going to skip to a question. There's a question, is there a web address for EPSCoR states in 2024? And I just added that link to the chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Donovan. And on that page, if you scroll down, there is a table that you can download that gives you the EPSCoR status for a number of years, including the current fiscal year, so that you can compare and see if your, state was on and off. So great resources available on that page.
Okay, let's see. There's a question here. Is there a requirement for a 10-week REEU programming?
We allow the applicants to be flexible with the timing of the program. We do not put any direct, guidelines on how many weeks, whether it has to be in summer or semester. Once again, as we mentioned, the different kinds, if it's an internship, an externship, or a combination of something you do on campus with field trips, all of those things are left to your innovation and creativity, and also to adapt to your particular area of study or your discipline within food and ag sciences. So you do not have to have 10 weeks, but you can.
Right. There's a question. What is the earliest possible start date, or what should we use as the requested start date for the project?
That is a great question. And I will give you a little bit of advice based on the last couple of years. And I've been with NIFA for 2 years, as I mentioned in the introductions. It seems that once we get to the beginning of a new fiscal year, and remember the federal fiscal year begins on October 1st, and remember that the budget has to be approved by Congress. So the president submits the budget, but Congress has to approve it. And if they've not come to consensus before the beginning of that new fiscal year, they might have a vote for a continuing resolution to continue working for a certain period of months. So this last fiscal year, you may have remembered, we had, I believe, 3 continuing resolutions until finally there was a vote on the president's budget to finance the rest of the year through September 30th. This time it didn't come until March. So as you saw, August is the usual application due date in the month. It's about mid-August. So applications were given in August, but our regular 4 to 6 months time period that we mentioned was extended considerably based on the inability of the Congress to get together on a budget. So with that in mind, you may want to consider a start date at the beginning of September, for example, so that if you had a project and had hoped to have 5 cohorts of students, then if you start in September, you can still have time to do a little development, recruit students for the first summer later on in May, June, July, and not miss your first cohort. So I hope that made sense. And that would be our suggestion, to start perhaps around early September. It should be within the same fiscal year as your application. And as I mentioned, the federal fiscal year runs from October 1st through September 30th. So you would want to try to get, your start date before October 1st of the following year. And we suggest September 1st.
Right. Thank you, Michelle. There's
Certainly.
a question here is, could you share more info on how we can track the status of an application that has been submitted? So far, we only know that our application has been submitted. So in the link is the NIFA application status dashboard. You would need your grants.gov tracking number here. And it's still in its beta version, so we're still working to make it better. This is a way to check the status of the application. And as Michelle alluded to earlier, we had three continuing resolutions this year. So oftentimes, if there is a delay in communication about the status, it's that we're waiting for more information as well, before we can provide information. Again, we try our best to keep you apprised of updates in real time as we receive them.
Yes, thank you. That's a great new tool that was launched, I believe, last June, that dashboard. So we're hoping that more of the applicants will be using that.
Right. See, we have a few more here.
Okay.
Yes, it says, I see that tuition for course credit is not allowed, but is that for participants only? I guess, well, the question is, what if we were interested in providing salary fringe and tuition stipend for graduate assistant support?
If it's a graduate assistantship, then you would need to use the word stipend because tuition is not, as it's clearly stated there, it's not an allowable cost. So if you were to give the graduate assistantship as a stipend, then the graduate student has the flexibility to use that stipend for their greatest needs.
All right, we have a question here. If our proposal was not reviewed due to any mistaken submission package, could you let us know which procedure is wrong? That's a really good question from a technical stance. Unfortunately, when you see that your application has been received by the agency, at that point, it is usually almost exclusively after that due date. So we would not be able to retroactively bring a proposal in that has maybe some formatting or file type challenges. We wouldn't be able to remedy that retroactively. So it's really important that any documents associated with the application are in PDF from the beginning.
And please do start early. If your institution has not registered with grants.gov prior, or if you're a nonprofit and working on this more on your own, you don't have those, staff support people, please do start very early on because some of those things can be a bit challenging, and get that grants.gov account set up, I would say, as soon as possible after today. And then that way you'll have everything ready when you, write your proposal, get all the components, really become a student of the RFA and the additional information supplement document to see that you've been meeting the criteria, that you have all of the required documents. Remember to include bibliographies as a scholarly piece of writing for your the support of your narrative, and have, as Donovan mentioned, everything in PDF format, and start your upload to grants.gov several days before the deadline in case there's some kind of a glitch that they might be able to help with, because they do have a support, a technical support email address, right, Donovan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I believe that there is some additional resources so outside of NIFA that really help with that, the support on the grants.gov side, and then even the sam.gov side as well.
Great.
All right, so we have a few more questions that have popped up. Are there any guidelines about the number of students to include in the project or the minimum length of experience?
We don't dictate the number of students. I will mention that there are guidelines saying that the majority of the budget should go to support students or your participants. So think about, depending on a 4 or a 5-year project, 48 or 60 months. Also depends on your discipline. There have been some applications I can remember where the discipline was quite technical, and there was some concern expressed by the panel whether any student could apply or there would have to be certain criteria or courses that the students take prior to this summer internship opportunity that they were developing. So if your students need specific course training, you can always, determine that and specify that when you're recruiting them to make sure that they can have the maximum benefit out of your experiential learning process. So I think it might depend, if it's very research focused and a technical area, then you might have to consider, more eligibility criteria for your students when you're doing your recruiting. And also think of your mentors. Mentoring is very important for student success. And especially if you're working with underserved students, that feeling of community and being part of the group and that encouragement to continue on when it feels like it's getting sticky and difficult to go forward is very important. So you might want to, we've seen lots of projects that include different tiers of mentoring, from faculty to student peers to industry. Choose your mentors wisely, depending on, what kind of program you have, and maybe include, community activities to make them feel like a cohort so they can, feel comfortable going with one another for advice or help, especially if you have students from multiple institutions out of state. Just consider all those different kinds of ramifications. And also, I think this might be a good moment to remind you that you can, on the funding opportunity page toward the bottom, access previously funded projects. So you can see what others have done, and you can get an idea of things that, oh, that sounds great, because I really want to foster that sense of community, and that seems to have been really successful, and you can borrow something similar to include in your program. Okay.
Right. So I have 2 questions that are related that I'm happy to handle. The question
Okay.
is phase a grant type? And the other related question is why is it, meaning phase, strengthening grants limited to EPSCoR states only? So from our phase website, so phase FASC is Food and Agricultural Science Enhancement Grants. And these are designed to help institutions develop competitive projects and to attract new scientists and educators into careers in high priority areas of national need in agriculture, food, and environmental sciences. And when we're looking at the states, the states are based on a 3-year rolling average. So these are the states that have generally received less AFRI funding than others. So these are the efforts that the AFRI program is taking to kind of proactively ensure that we're reaching everyone. Um, the way that phase work is that there's a percentage of funds that are set aside for phase grants. In the case of REEU, so this would be um, institutions that are in EPSCoR states, and perhaps you're not in an EPSCoR state. However, perhaps you're at a minority serving institution, and that would allow you to be eligible for a phase strengthening grants. Uh, Now, outside of REEU, but in other AFRI programs, phase grants may be new investigator grants, pre and postdoc fellowships, um, sabbatical grants, those type of things. So those aren't offered through REEU, but kind of this overall, this is what a phase grant could do, but it depends again on the funding priority level. All right, I want to go back to our questions and answers here.
Okay.
Have requirements changed that allow REEU programs to hire program coordinators to assist with programming?
You can definitely, have salaried personnel on the grants. Once again, the majority of the budget is for student support. However, managing the project is very important. So having your key personnel, who may include a project coordinator, could be a graduate student, could be a consultant. Sometimes consultants are included on the grants as evaluators, external evaluators. So you have the ability to do that. We just remind you that as you're putting the whole budget together, to consider, cost effectiveness and your budget justification and your narrative, because those are all important parts of your application that will be under review by the peer panel.
Oh, and while we're on the topic of budget, there's a related question. It has a budgetary implication. Is there a stipend amount limit?
We don't provide any guidance on stipend amounts in the RFA, but we do encourage you to consider your competition. So that students, especially if it's summer, might be trying to gain a bit of experience, but they need also to maintain their living expenses. So if you compare other stipends, perhaps NSF, NIH, and job opportunities in the area for students and what they might receive, think about those things when you're putting together a package, so that it's reasonable for the students, and you can include just a bulk stipend, but you can also include travel support as a line item within the participant support. You can include a subsistence support. So if they come from out of state and will be staying on your campus for 8 to 10 weeks, and they need to stay in the dorms and things of that nature, you can provide a subsistence portion of that too. So those are things that we ask you to consider. It should be, reasonable and competitive, not so high that it's, not considered reasonable, or too low, so that your students are going to say, I would love to do this, but I have to pay for my expenses and I just can't afford to do that, and then choose not to apply because the stipend is too low. So those are things we ask you to consider.
All right. We have looks 4 questions here that we have left. The first one is, and actually these these will be related questions. One is, would a nonprofit be funded for a workforce development program for middle to high schoolers for middle to high school youth in agriculture?
Well, this program in particular is focused on undergraduate university students. So if the focus of the program is on school-aged students without including university students, then you would probably need to look at one of the other programs available in education and workforce development. And I'm thinking that might be PDAL. Are you thinking that too, Donovan?
Yes, that sounds, I'm a little fuzzy on some of those other areas.
Let
but
me see if
know
I
that
can, but I will, yeah, here we have under education and workforce development, the first one, professional development for agricultural literacy. Maybe working with teachers, and then AWT, the agricultural workforce training at community colleges, but there's this, and then FAIN, food and agricultural non-formal education, they work with youth as well. So I would suggest you check all three of those. I'm not on all of those details. I don't remember all of them. But you could also consider including both. If you wanted to apply for REEU, you would need to get your university students, so you should try to maybe collaborate with some higher ed institutions with programs in ag, and then maybe pair them up to mentor with some high school students. All of those things are possibilities. You guys can be as innovative and creative as you can think. But do consider, if this does not seem to be quite the right fit for your idea, please do consider those first three programs on the list there to see which one might be the best fit. And if you're not sure after you read, please write to me and I will contact some of the national program leaders. Their contact information will be also in the RFA.
Yeah, there's a question about more information, and show you've already hit that. But I
Okay.
just want to remind everyone, oh, keep checking those emails and notifications. The other program areas of AFRI, EWD, Education Workforce Development, they will have their own RFA technical assistance webinars, and
Yes.
yeah, they are the people that really know the ins and outs of these other program areas related to education and workforce development. And
Yes.
on that AFRI EWD page, a link that we've provided, there are similar links for abstracts of those previously funded projects, those that have been successful. If you're thinking about what type of projects would fit well with these various priority areas of AFRI EWD.
That's a great point, Donovan, to keep at the bottom of the funding page here where the RFA is present, to look at abstracts from all these different programs to see where yours might fit the best.
And our last question also has a high school reference here. So would high school students taking community college classes through a career center be eligible to participate in the REEU offerings? If so, would these students count towards the 50% of participants from outside our institution?
From what I understand, that you're saying you would have 50% of the students from being undergraduate students, and then other students be from community colleges. Yes, that could be worked in. and high school students taking like advanced placement courses at community colleges. I believe that that could work. Let's see. I don't know if I'm looking at the right page here. No, sorry about that. Yeah, because you are, as the institution offering the bachelor's degree, I'm assuming here, the host institution, and you can collaborate with other institutions that would not even be able to qualify as a primary applicant. So you could work with junior colleges, even if you, for example, if you had an integrated project, you as the host institution provide a bachelor's degree in food and ag sciences, and then you reach out to community colleges to also train some of their students in your programs, and hopefully they'll transfer to your four-year program later on. You could have articulation agreements or not, but I do believe that that could fit in.
Right. We do have another question. So can REEU fund workforce development for K through 12 agricultural teachers?
That I'm pretty sure would be the PDAL, since the K through 12 teachers would, I'm assume, not be undergraduate students anymore. They would have graduated and have their certification for teaching. So they would no longer qualify as an undergraduate student for the, the primary group. So remember that as a host institution of the award, you would have to qualify under these eligibility requirements for an integrated project, or these eligibility requirements on the screen for a single function education or a single function research project. So let's see here. Can you repeat the question one more time, Donovan?
Yes. A moment. It says, can REEU fund workforce development for K through 12 teachers?
K through 12 teachers.
And I've pulled up a reference to PDAL. I won't go too in depth here since we're focusing on REEU. But I just want to note with the I know we're using lots of acronyms. So PDAL is Professional Development for Agricultural Literacy. And this is to promote faculty expertise and encourage widespread implementation of educational innovation at K through 14 levels. And also to note, we're thinking about support. A minimum of 50% of project direct cost for this one, professional development for agricultural literacy, is for participant support. And the participants here are teachers. So that might be a better fit for that type of inquiry.
Yes, I do agree. So that would be the first program beneath education and workforce development on the screen, the professional development for agricultural literacy. And as we indicate here, it'll be in the same request for application. You'll just look under their program name.
And
Great. You guys have asked a lot of great questions. Are there any others, Donovan?
yes, an additional one came in. Can we utilize the REEU funds to support pre-service teachers, so undergraduate students enrolling in education or STEM degrees to become agricultural teachers after they graduate?
Yes, if they are currently still undergraduates, they count. So pre-service teachers, those that are doing their forgotten the exact word now, it escapes me, but those that are taking the courses where they're doing the practica, perhaps is the word, in schools and they haven't yet graduated, yes.
And those are all the questions that we have in the
Wonderful.
chat box.
Let me just scroll down. I don't want to make anybody dizzy. So I won't go too fast. I'll scroll down to the end of the presentation one more time, just so that our contact information is present on the screen. And once again, thank you very much, all of you, for your kind attention and your great questions. And we want to also give thanks to our ASL interpreters today. Both of them have done a great job. Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Again, I echo Michelle. Thank you all for joining us today. And I've put our email addresses in the chat box since they're not as easily accessible through the slide that you see projected there. And as a reminder, these slides and a recording will be available. It's the same link for the event itself. And you can expect that in about maybe a week or so. But yes, we will make sure that you all have these slides with those links to the resources that we have provided along with this recording.
Thank you so much, Donovan.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone. Have a great afternoon.